Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silvermont, and time to talk about the Dark Souls bosses again. In the last video I spoke about the humanoid knight bosses from the Souls franchise, Artorias, Ornstein, Velsut, Gale, and so forth. Which of them have the most impressive feats? Who is the strongest? Who is your favourite? Who is my favourite? And so forth. Today we're going to continue the talk on bosses, but this time we'll be talking about the monster bosses, dragons, abominations, and the like. So, let's get started. We aren't going to cover every boss from every game. I'll pick 3 or 4 from each that I think are the most impressive. Of course, if you disagree or just want to share your own thoughts on the bosses, please do in the comments section down below. But for Demon Souls, this game has a very interesting array of bosses, and it's been very hard to select just a few. But here are my picks: the Storm King, the Dragon God, and the Leechmonger. Starting with the Storm King, I believe this is the largest boss in the Souls franchise that we've ever fought. Not only is it huge, flying and accompanied by many storm beasts, but it's also able to effectively carpet bomb the arena. Unless you have powerful ranged capabilities, you've no real way to attack it. Fortunately, the Slayer of Demons has access to the Storm Ruler, a blade with sky-cutting power that is perfectly suited to bring this demon down. The Dragon God, on the other hand, is another huge enemy that we can't fight in a traditional manner. We must make use of ancient weaponry to disable it, before we can strike the killing blow. The Dragon God has devastating punches and would probably make short work of many other smaller enemies. We don't know too much about the Dragon God, but he certainly comes across as intimidating. As for the Leechmonger, this boss would lose to any others that have wide-ranging fire attacks, certainly. But if you take that weakness out of the picture, I feel like the Leechmonger would actually be a rather terrifying opponent. Not only does it have the ability to regenerate, but I feel like that massive leeches could envelop and consume anything smaller or close to the same size as Leechmonger. It is an extremely easy fight, but I feel like it would prove a powerful opponent, so long as it's not fighting anyone or anything that can just nuke it. There's a very obvious pick for Dark Souls that I'm not sure if it's fair to include or not. Manus, Father of the Abyss. So we'll get back to him in a bit, after we discuss some of the others. I think my picks would have to be Kalameet, Nito, and Priscilla. There are very good arguments for other bosses too. The Bed of Chaos is devastating in its arena, and Seath is downright immortal until his crystal is destroyed. The 4 kings are similar to the Bed, but if you take them out of the Abyss, who knows what would happen? Would they even exist? But Kalameet, Goth manages to down the worm rather easily, sure, but he impresses upon us how terrifying the Black Dragon is, that even Anor Londo dared not provoke him. This is one of those rare examples where we have both a story and gameplay perspective on a boss. And he is one of the hardest bosses in Dark Souls. Had we not gothed down the dragon, I can't see how we would have defeated him. How about Nito? Well, he's an odd one. Whilst he is one of the most intimidating bosses, his attacks are not too much to deal with. The challenge comes more from the dark arena filled with skeletons. Still, Nito possesses one of the Lord Souls. When we encounter him, much of his soul's energy has been offered to death, whatever that means, and in addition, Pinwheel has stolen the Gravelord's power, but it is never elaborated upon what that means. All the same, I feel like at full power, Nito would be quite the opponent. Remember what he did to the dragons? He unleashed a miasma of death. How are you going to handle that if you can't fly or teleport away from it? And then there's Priscilla. Technically, she's not really much of a monster, but the game does refer to her as an abomination, so she's a little unique, a talking monster enemy, and an optional one who attacks in self-defense. Her soul remarks that she is the antithesis to all life, and even the gods feared her life hunt ability. She also has the ability to mask herself and become invisible, in a manner somewhat different from the sorcery of Ulasil. And it's worth pointing out that during an earlier concept of Dark Souls, Priscilla was the heroine. It is never elaborated upon, like so much in Dark Souls, what that meant, but from my perspective it implied that she was the maiden in white, the level up lady. We would feed her souls and obtain power from her, the power of Life Hunt, the ability to kill the gods, to satiate the Lord Vessel. So what about Manus? I would say he is without a doubt the strongest boss in Dark Souls, almost to the point where it seems unfair to include him, as the Abyss is such an overpowered force in Dark Souls that literally nothing can withstand it. Still, let's move on. And Dark Souls 2 is an interesting one. The 4 Lord Souls from the first game return with new hosts, but the most powerful bosses? I think I'd have to pick the Ancient Dragon, Dark Lurker, and Lord Aldir. I considered the Old Iron King, the Smelter Demon, even Nishandra, but I feel these 3 trump the others. The Ancient Dragon was notorious when the game released for being almost a joke of a boss. Nearly all of his attacks would do thousands and thousands of damage, so much damage that you would never be able to have enough health to withstand it. Not to mention they filled the entire arena. The story of the Ancient Dragon would suggest that it is a creation of Aldir and perhaps Vendrick, grafting the soul of a giant onto the remains of an ancient dragon to bring it back to life in some capacity. Although there is also an ancient dragon's soul located in the game which remarks that the soul itself was created by Aldir and Vendrick. Either way, it appears to be an ancient dragon that was revived, recreated by Aldir. The Dark Lurker is a very mysterious boss, as we know very little about it. It lurks in the dark chasm of old, the remnants of the Abyss born of Manus. It is possible that the Dark Lurker is likewise connected to Manus, but unlike the shards, it does not speak to us. It is an almost angelic looking enemy capable of a vast array of magical and physical attacks. It can even split, creating multiple copies of itself. With resistance to dark and fire and magic, but a weakness to lightning, that could be a clue. What else is weak to lightning? Dragons. The Dark Diver rewards you with the Dragon Chime upon defeating the Dark Lurker, and it's worth noting that Seath from Kingsfield 2 is also a ghostly white angelic looking figure fought in a dark arena. Finally, there's Aldir, the Scholar of the First Sin, one of the very few bosses that we can defeat but do not kill. Having performed terrible experiments, Aldir has twisted himself into something resembling a monster of roots and branches. He is able to manifest himself wherever there are bonfires at the least, insinuating that perhaps he has joined his existence, his soul, with the arch trees or bonfires themselves. He experimented on humans, dragons and giants in his efforts to research and overcome the curse. As a boss, he isn't all that hard. He uses fire and root-based attacks and is able to surround himself in flames. Yet never does Aldir seem to exhibit any particular aggression towards us. Indeed, before he fights us, he doesn't seek to claim our soul or kill us. He merely remarks, "Give us your answer," before attacking. He is also one of the few NPCs throughout the games that is not just immortal, but outright ignores attacks, along with the everlasting dragon of Ash Lake. As with the first game, Dark Souls 3 has us seeking down 4 Lords of Cinder, bringing them back to their thrones. But who are the most powerful monsters of the game? If you ask me, Dark Eater Midir, Yhorm the Giant, and Aldrich. I also have to give a special mention to Sullivan and High Lord Wolnir. Although Wolnir is a very isolated boss, I feel that a large part of his strength would come from his keen desire to outlive others, to survive. Sullivan is a powerful opponent, but I can't see him overcoming Yhorm. You could also make the argument that neither of them are strictly monsters. Dark Eater Midir is one of the toughest bosses, having one of the highest health pools of all bosses. Having been corrupted by the Abyss, Midir is even capable of unleashing dark attacks. Yhorm, on the other hand, has almost twice as much health as Midir, but is exceedingly weak to the Storm Ruler. That's right, same name as Demon Souls. Yhorm once fought with Great Shield and Machete, and it's hard to see what might be able to stand against him without Storm Ruler or some other ability to exploit his weakness. Finally, Aldrich. An interesting one. It is my belief that we come across Aldrich in a vulnerable state. He is devouring Gwyndolin, which I feel renders part of him exposed to our attacks. Normally, fighting Aldrich might be like fighting a swimming pool, unless you're going to evaporate it all at once. Just what can you do? Of course, that's just how I look at the boss. We caught him at a bad time. We know that Aldrich is in the process of consuming Gwyndolin, And some people like to think that he also devoured Priscilla and Nito as well, for he uses the Life Hunt miracle, and some of his attire and his weapon resemble Nito in ways. Personally, I don't think he got Priscilla, but I could see him having consumed Nito's soul at some point. Of course, if you manage to silence Aldrich or Gwendolyn, he is unable to use many of those magic attacks. Imagine if Aldrich managed to consume even more bosses, would he gain their attacks too? Perhaps it is more his potential I am looking at here, for it mirrors the player in some ways. We claim boss souls and then take their powers. Aldrich straight up consumes them. Straight off the bat, I think this largely revolves on Manus and Uldir. Manus is the father of the Abyss, and lore-wise and gameplay-wise, one of the strongest bosses we've encountered. Nothing is resistant to the Abyss, so far as we're aware, with the possible exception of the Ancient Dragons. Uldir, on the other hand, has some form of immortality. It may be a trick as simple as Seath's, but for some reason I don't think so. But let's ignore those two for now. I think we can discount Leechmonger and Aldrich for the simple fact that both would be susceptible to large AoE attacks that would instantly wipe them out. The dragons, Ancient Dragon, Kalameet, and Midir versus the giants of Dragon God and Yhorm. How about the Storm King? Well, I think any of the dragons would be able to destroy the Storm King in the air, as they are faster with more mobility. With the exception of the Ancient Dragon, he might not be that fast. Yhorm I think would be able to manage against the Storm King only if he managed to catch it or had a great bow. When it comes to the Dark Lurker, a large part of it depends on how much magic resistance the others might have, but well, who wins between Ancient Dragon, Midir, and Kalameet? Midir is called a descendant of the Ancient Dragons, Kalameet is called the last of the Ancient Dragons, and Ancient Dragon is, well, a revived Ancient Dragon. If you ask me, Kalameet is more powerful than Midir. I know, Midir is way bigger, but think about it. Kalameet was ostensibly the last Ancient Dragon, the last of a race that Gwyn tried so hard to defeat, and he was so mighty that Anor Londo itself dared not provoke him, even though Gwyn started this war against the dragons in the first place. Plus, the Bringer of Calamity has more unique powers thanks to his magical eye. What is Midir going to do once he's been grabbed by that eye and starts taking double damage? Ancient Dragon, on the other hand, despite being a fake, is absolutely enormous, and about as close to the true Ancient Dragons as we get. Between him and Kalameet, I can see it going either way, but I'm inclined to give the win to Kalameet. So at this point it's down to Kalameet, Yhorm, Dragon God, and Dark Lurker. Honestly, I think Dragon God would lose to any of the others here, as for the most part he just punches stuff, and the others would all have ways to smack him on the head. How about Kalameet versus the others? Well, if Yhorm has a bow, I think he might stand a very good chance at defeating Kalameet. If not, he would have no realistic way to get him. Dark Lurker, on the other hand, has so much magic that I could actually see him downing and possibly even killing Kalameet. Yhorm versus Dark Lurker? I think Yhorm would probably be able to tank enough of the magic and use force to destroy the Dark Lurker. I think Dark Lurker would beat Kalameet, Kalameet would beat Yhorm, but Yhorm would beat Dark Lurker. And of the three, I think Dark Lurker would stand the best chance against Manus, but he would still lose. Yhorm would probably do the best against Uldir, but again I don't think any of them would be able to beat him. So what about Manus versus Uldir? Science versus Primeval Man? That's a very tough question. I am slightly inclined to give the win to Uldir on the basis that he was probably studied the Dark and the Abyss and the remnants of Manus to an extent that he might know a way to deal with it. Manus, on the other hand, is a berserk force of nature almost. I think in all of Dark Souls, he has the most raw power and nobody can really withstand the Abyss to boot. But then Uldir is a scholar, a researcher, and seems to be immortal. Uldir pretty much reads the wiki and finds out the weakness and resistances, so I feel like that gives him a very big advantage. Plus he seems to know about everyone and everything. But hey, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and if you'd like to support my channel, there's a link to Patreon at the end of this video and in the comments. Supporting in this way gets you access to a Discord channel, where you can talk with me and other like-minded individuals about, well, anything really. Until next time though, thank you so much for watching, and see you later.